Hello, welcome back to my live stream. My name is Nick Dagan Best, and I am an astrologer. Um, all right, it is Monday, as it always is when I'm doing the solo live stream. And as always is the case, I have no friggin' clue what I'm going to talk about today. Uh, our policy, at least until now, both in the streams with Patrick and the streams I do by myself, is yeah, just turn on the camera, start talking, have no specific direction, and somehow something somewhat astrologically worthwhile results from the experiment. In most cases, the experiment is quite successful. Once in a while, it's a bit of a kerplop, but even those ones are interesting in and of themselves. Anyway, yeah, let's see. I'm not sure where I left off last week. Okay, Pixie's asking, any thoughts on the secondary progressed sun changing signs and houses? Yeah, I mean, that's it's something that everyone goes through. In the sense that, and every sign is a sort of response to the previous sign, right? You know, like Taurus is a response to Aries, Gemini is a response to Taurus, and so on and so forth. And the progressed sun changing signs, you know, anyone who lives to, say, be 80 years old is going to go through it probably at least twice over the course of their lifetime, and it tends to correspond to a discernible new chapter in the person's life, and just, but you know, more generally, it traces a person's growth. I mean, we all sort of grow, some more than others. But as the progressed sun moves and all the other planets that are interacting with it over the course of the secondary progression cycle, in some way sort of reflects who you become over time, as opposed to who you were at the moment of birth. You know, how life shapes you, how experiences shape you, all that stuff. I hope that helps. But yeah, that's one of the things you look for, any of the planets, but certainly the progressed sun changing signs in secondary progressions is really important to follow, as are planetary stations and things like lunations and eclipses and what have you. And I think we've been talking a lot about that lately. Okay. And, you know, I mean, if you're asking about significance, my approach to secondary progressions is really that they're transits. They're just like transits, except they're not happening in real time, but rather on a sort of internal clock. But I interpret them in the same way that I interpret transits. I use a tri-wheel. I look at transits and secondary progressions together. I'm rarely looking at one without looking at the other. And yeah, I mean, that's, so if you consider transits to be significant, I do, then they certainly are. Oh, Soaring Eagle is asking, will my Germany and Russia databases ever become available? Yes. Yes, they absolutely will. I'm glad people are excited about that. I've got a fair number of national databases. I know in the package I've released for sale, it's just the Britain and the American one, which are two of the larger ones. But that being said, I still have substantially sized Russia, Germany, France, China, India, Iran, South Africa, and a lot of other countries in development, you know, to some degree or another. Mexico, certainly Brazil. They're all coming along. There's still a lot more to add to all of them. But yeah, the plan is ultimately to make them all available. And the important thing to me is that that people can purchase them, but also access updates easily. This also goes for what I've just put up for sale. You know, the people who've shelled out the $20 for what I've sold so far, I want to be sure that when I make corrections or updates, add important charts to a given file, that they can access them, and, you know, without having to sort of rebuy the file every time I do an update. So I've got to work all that out. first of all, getting it, getting it ready for preparing it commercially, either on my website or through some kind of app. That's one of the things I'm just sort of mulling over now, or maybe both, probably both. Yeah, just sort of transporting everything over and getting all the sort of the back end of that operation running. And then, yes, I absolutely will make the German and Russian databases available. And I'm sorry you have to wait for them, but I'm also glad that people are eager to have things like that, because it's the plan. That's the plan. Yeah, the whole thing about selling the database, I mean, it's something that's been in the cards for a long time, but I put it off for a long, long time. Chris ultimately convinced me to do it, but as a result, even though it's something I've been contemplating for years, we wound up doing it kind of quickly, just to experiment, like, hey, let's sell 3 files and see if people are even interested. But they are interested. So, yeah, I've been working away on my end, sort of distracted from my video projects and working on the database and combing through things to see if I need to make corrections or what have you, or important things that are missing that should be there. That's just it. I mean, the very nature of the whole operation is it's always in flux. It needs to be upgraded all the time. That's part of what makes it tricky for one person to do it. Ultimately, I'd like this to be some kind of global collective operation, but it'll have to grow to that level. Okay, retrograde planets in the natal, especially as ascendant chart rulers. Well, I mean, the thing about a retrograde planet is, unless Mercury and Venus can be retrograde and under the beams, and that's a whole other kettle of fish. In those cases, when a planet is, when a planet is under the beams, including a retrograde Venus or a retrograde Mercury, the sun takes up the significations of those planets until those planets become Time Lords, and then they sort of come alive in their own. So that can be a bit more sort of, a retrograde Venus or a retrograde Mercury under the beams of the sun are sort of integrated into what whatever sign it's in. But when you're talking about the other planets, what you've really got with a retrograde planet is that it's visible in the night sky, and it's visible in the night sky, so it plays into the fact that it's close to Fossis points. You're looking at, in all likelihood, in most cases, unless like I was born right after a Saturn retrograde station. So my progressed Saturn is never going to station, but most people's Saturns and Jupiters, if they're born with a retrograde, will likely have a progressed, direct station. And so that's, to my mind, you've got, when you see a retrograde planet, like it's not so much like, a lot of astrologers, I guess, will interpret it, the retrograde itself. To my mind, what it notifies me of is I see something that's going to sort of turn over the course of the lifetime by secondary progression. And it's a key to me to look for, when is that planet going to turn and what is that going to mean? But I don't necessarily if you're Aries rising and you have Mars retrograde in some other sign other than Aries, I don't, as to Mars being retrograde ruling that ascendant, I'm going to think about whether or not it's a diurnal nocturnal chart first and foremost. I'm going to think a lot about, I'm going to think about where in the cycle that Mars retrograde is. Is it close to the retrograde station, close to the direct station, close to the opposition to the sun? How is it going to shift over the course of the lifetime? Which is a general question that I'm asking about any of the planets that I'm looking at in a nativity. But it just, to see it visibly retrograde already in the nativity, it's just going to give me a clue that there's the planet's on a journey that over the course of the secondary progression is going to take it through a number of different phases. And it's not just going to be this one thread that goes throughout the lifetime that you can get with, some instances. Like, say, if you're born with Sun sextile Jupiter, if the sun's approaching the sextile to Jupiter, most of the lifetime will be, you'll get to be the age of 60 and you'll have a progressed sun conjunct progressed Jupiter, and that's about it in terms of measuring Jupiter's journey. As opposed to if you have sun opposite Jupiter, then like probably around the age of 40, 50, 60, that progressed Jupiter will station direct, and that'll be interesting. And depending what houses it rules, and then you've got something that you're building out from in your chart reading. I think that's kind of maybe something that's different about me compared to a lot of astrologers. Like, I just don't think about things in purely symbolic terms. I mean, I do, I'm a horoscopic astrologer. I use symbolism. I use planetary archetypes and sign archetypes, but only so much. It's not like these are more like the things I use to decorate the tree and not the tree itself. Ultimately, like, first and foremost, I'm thinking about the planets, not what signs they're in. That's secondary. The first is where are they in their cycles? Where are they relative to the sun and moon, and to each other? And that's first and foremost. It was really interesting, actually. When I first started dating the woman who's now my wife, she was trying to egg me to write an introduction to astrology book, like a really basic, introduction book. And she said, she was just saying, like, she was trying to goad me into doing it. And she said, come on, like, start with the first chapter. What would the first chapter be? The signs? And I was like, the signs? And it suddenly struck me that probably is where a lot of astrology introductions, like Astrology 101, start, is like learning the signs. And to me, that's just asked backwards. The signs would be like chapter 3, chapter 4, something like that. Maybe chapter 2, but probably chapter 3. In other words, I would start with the planets, the things that we're really following here, and the signs are just like the places that they move around in. So hopefully that just clarifies my position on that. So Kai's asking this follow-up. I'm saying invisibility is the transfer of significations, not necessarily retrogradation. Just making sure you understand. Invisibility, yes, does have to do with that transfer between the sun and then when the planet sort of takes back its significations when it's a Time Lord. Retrogradation is more sort of this broader journey, and you're either, you might be like, if the planet is approaching the opposition to the sun, then the journey of that planet is it's getting brighter and brighter and brighter, because it's always at its brightest when it's directly opposite the sun. If it's past that point in the nativity and it's heading towards its direct station, then you want to count how many days prior to the direct station. In other words, how many secondary progressed years do we need to count for that planet to make that direct station, and what's that going to say in the person's nativity? And especially all the more so if that planet is the ascendant ruler, like you were asking about. So I hope that answers. If it's not, ask me again, Kai, and I'll try to tailor my answer just that much closer to what you're asking. No, I don't want to write an introduction to astrology book. Everyone does it. There's like a million out there, and I'm really enjoying sort of where I am. I'm enjoying being, I mean, this is the astrologer I've been for years, but I'm enjoying the fact that people are actually, interested in mundane astrology, in synodic cycles, and in these sort of little wheelhouses that I've been carrying around a long time. So to sort of abandon all that and go into, making an Astrology 101 book. It's not something I see myself doing. That being said, if you are writing an introduction to astrology book, if my opinion has any value, then I would say, please don't start chapter 1 with the signs. Please consider starting with the planets and going to the signs at a later, later on in the lesson. But that's my opinion, which anyone can choose to disregard. That's about it on that front. Okay. Let's see. I was really happy about the question about the German and Russian files. maybe just as a treat, since I'm not putting them up for sale yet, I can just sort of show what's in there so far. Let's see. Okay, this is Ireland. Someone earlier on Twitter was talking about Irish history. So just the Irish history, I have almost 200 charts. I mean, it's a lot more work I have to do. My Germany is, nearly 1,000 charts. So more substantial than I'm afraid. That's not any sort of indication of a bias, I promise you, but just, all kinds of different things in German history. I guess later on I get a lot more of these sort of rock concerts that come through, but then there's even things like, the Bader Meinhof gang that I was, studying. Obviously I'm into revolutionaries and things like that, but the earlier German history is a lot more sort of straight German history. The things pertaining to the war, or the First World War, Battle of Jutland, and Archduke arrested, Germany declares war on Russia, all that stuff. Oh, the good old days. And then I love studying the horoscope of Kaiser II. He's got one of my favorite charts to study. He's quite the clown. But I enjoy him. So I've got, let's see if we go back here. This is the beginning of the Germany as we know it, the German Reich, the Second Reich. And just going back, different sort of conventions, Paris, blah, blah, blah. So that's Germany. And then I have Russia. Russia is bigger than that, I think. How big is Russia? Oh, it's about the same size as Germany. Oh, that's funny. A few rock concerts, though. Right up to the most recent, obviously I have a lot of catching up to do with the Ukraine war, but I do have the invasion. I tend to always be behind. I study more the past than the present. But a lot of different stuff in Russian history here. The purges and the whole revolution, and a lot of stuff from the Tsarist era, going back to Catherine the Great and even before. Back to the the first chart is when the Mongols Kiev in the year 1240. In 1240, Kiev was already a major spot, whereas Moscow is still, a little farm with a couple of cows. So it's really ironic considering where it's today. Okay. Anyway, that's that. Oh yes. Yesterday, puzzling about the Mars-Sun conjunction in Virgo in 1925. The planning of the 1940 invasion started right there, as did the SS started there. Yeah, let's look at that Soaring Eagle. I saw that tweet, and I think I have some things to share about that. Now, what I have in September 25, I have the publishing of Mein Kampf in July of 1925, but periods you were talking about 2 months later with the Sun-Mars conjunction. I know what you're referring to there. That's something I still have to add in. I do have books in my library from the period, and I'm gonna, as time goes on, all the files will be greatly expanded. A lot of material I can add in. So yeah, things like the creation of the SS would be important. But you can see overall, I have a pretty good timeline of the Nazi era. Here's the famous Hitler being noted that Elsbeth Eberstein has predicted that someone born on the 20th of April, a man of action born on the 20th of April 1889, can expose himself to personally uncautious action and very likely trigger off an uncontrollable crisis. And she writes this 3 months before the beer hall, or 2 months before the beer hall putsch. 2 months, 6 weeks before the beer hall putsch. And Hitler sort of blows off the prediction, but impressive when you think about it. So yeah, I've got he's arrested for the putsch, and he begins his sentence at Landsberg prison, and he publishes Mein Kampf, the first volume, and then the second volume at the end of 1926. Yeah, there's other things like, Fritz Lang and Heidegger, of course, and Brecht and Weil, all those other figures, Kurt Weill meeting Gershwin, so different things happening at the time. Horoscope of Stockhouse, all that. Der Blaue Engel, with the immortal Marlene Dietrich. Yeah, you get, elections, and this is a famous date, Hitler being sworn in, the Enabling Act, where's the Reichstag fire? Reichstag fire, there it is. And yeah, Germany leaves the League of Nations, and Triumph of the Wills, Night of the Long Knives, the Hindenburg pushing, the Anschluss, Munich Agreement, Kristallnacht. You can see the whole thing. Good old Karl Ernst Kraft, everyone's favorite Nazi astrologer. Interesting person to study. If you German astrologers in this era are really fascinating to me, and really amazing work. I mean, despite their Kraft himself, tried to sort of cozy up to the Nazis, and found himself dying of some terrible, what are those diseases, drinking, polluted water. He died in a train car on the way to a concentration camp. But at this point, he's still this young, ambitious Nazi astrologer, and they haven't turned on him yet. So yeah, here's the non-aggression pact, declaring war on Germany. Meeting with Molotov. Hess flies for Scotland. The RAF night attacks against Berlin, firebombing of Dresden. Yeah, the eventual sort of the raid on Kiel. Soviet Red Army enters Berlin. Hitler marries Eva, commits suicide, and Jodl signs the Act of Surrender. And from then there's Potsdam, there's Nuremberg, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's not a bad chronology of that period, but it can always be improved and expanded, which I certainly the Strasser chart. Okay. I mean, I have births for the two Strasser brothers. Is that what you mean? There's dies in the Night of the Long Knives. Where are those guys? One of them dies in the Night of the Long Knives, and the other guy flees the country. But they're two brothers. They're rival to Hitler for control of the Nazi Party, and yeah, he has them sort of take him up. Dude, he's important too. Where are those guys? I'm sure I have them. Huh. It's possible that I don't know. I know I have them in here. I know I have them in here. Or maybe, do I have them in Austria or something? I don't know. All right. I'm sorry I'm not finding them, but I'm sure they're in there. Yeah, both active in Georg Strasser, 1892. I'm here. Huh. I'm sure May 31st. Do I have them in another file? No. Okay, well, no one's more surprised than me because I have studied them. I know about the two brothers and everything. I guess I just haven't put them in there yet. But that's the kind of thing I should be adding. I think they're in Astro Databank. Yeah, they are. So why would I not have them? There they are. There's Gregor. There's Otto, who's got a C-rated birth time. But I knew I looked them up and I was sure I had put them in. All right. Well, there you go. Caught me with my pants down, but there you go. I'll make sure they're added into the database promptly. See, that's the kind of thing I need to have in place beforehand. Okay, but I didn't. We can come back to the Strasser brothers when I have them entered in. Bliss to be. Hi, Nick. I know you mentioned predicting health challenges in your own chart ahead of time. I was wondering whether you've predicted anything else in your own chart ahead of time that surprised you. Yeah, possibly. I don't remember. I do a really good of not paying too much attention to my own chart. Every now and then it'll occur to me to check up on it, but it's not something I do a lot. Look, in my first years of study, like anyone who studies astrology, I learned a lot about myself. It really helped me grow and be a better version of myself, so on and so forth. But eventually, more important to me, good at astrology, to understand astrology, than it was to just sort of like over not become of me. Yeah, I didn't see my life growing as an astrologer if I kept looking at my own chart. What happened to me with the health condition, I mean, this was a secondary progressed solar eclipse that it happened to me in 2007. But I knew it was going to happen. I started studying astrology in 1995. And I think by like 95, 96, really early on, I learned secondary progressions and I worked out that was going to happen. And so I spent like a decade with that being in the back of my mind. There's nothing you can really do. It's like being in seeing a car crash coming from a decade ahead. There wasn't anything I could really do. It just, eventually the day came and, sure enough, my health crashed and my life crashed. So it was really just something as simple as that. And it wasn't something that I spent a lot of time analyzing. I just knew it was eventually coming and I didn't know what it would necessarily mean. I wanted to be optimistic. But that was, deceiving myself, I guess. But that's really about it. I mean, I would say like, I don't, I don't spend a lot of time looking at my own chart, just every now and then, just to catch up. But probably like a year goes by and I don't do it, I'm really, I don't think there's only so much I'm going to learn. And kind of a trap because obviously when you start studying astrology, your own chart is like the best learning tool. It gets you a really great distance. So I'm not saying like, don't do it. But I think that the time does come when you're like, okay, I've done enough of that and I really need to not obsess over my chart, but rather get a sense of the world around me, the people around me, challenge the notions that I develop from only studying my own chart. Sometimes you get certain ideas that you have to sort of undo, and it takes just as much work to sort of unlearn some of your earlier lessons that might have ill-conceived or too narrow-minded or what have you. I mean, there's a lot of that in studying astrology. Is you get certain ideas of things and then you have to sort of strip them back and rethink them, and that's fine. I mean, I wouldn't know how to get to where I am without having to go through that process. But somewhere in all of there, my thought is, yeah, you got to sort of put yourself aside and start looking at astrology from the perspective of the cosmos. Really try to be above it all somehow. I mean, it's a pretense, obviously, still a potentially useful one. Okay. All right. Well, I'm totally puzzled why I don't have the Strasser brothers in the file. I'm sorry to obsess over that, but I'm like, I remember specifically looking them up. I guess I just didn't get them in there. This is happening for me now. I'm excited when to start consultation because I want to study other people more than myself now. Yeah. I mean, it's certainly if you want to be a consulting astrologer, yeah, you got, there's kind of, look, it's a double-edged sword to astrology culture. Because there is something really great about sort of going inward and getting this. It's about as objective as a view of yourself as you can get, really. I mean, apart from maybe, filming yourself and watching watching yourself from the outside, but it's deeper than that, obviously. But astrology culture at the same time, I think it sort of encourages a level of self-reflection at the expense of a sort of a more global perspective. It's just part of the culture. I mean, some of it is just natural. You go to an astrology conference and you get into conversations with people and you're talking about your rising signs or what aspects to your moon you have, and the conversation just sort of hovers around there, and you can find any two groups of people at any astrology conference sort of having those conversations, and there's something kind of friendly and social about that. And there's a little bit to learn, obviously, watching. Someone tells you they're Scorpio rising and you get a sense of the way they look, and maybe that adds to your notion of what being a Scorpio rising means in a physical sense. Who knows? But yeah, I'm more sort of, I find that to be just kind of astrological small talk, if you want. I hate to sound sort of lofty and above it all, but I'm not someone who's generally up for too much small talk. I guess everyone can do a little, but especially because with astrology, there's the opportunity to have much more interesting conversations, more nuanced conversations that aren't about me, or about me listening to you talk about yourself, or there's a place and a context to have those intimate revelations and those sort of deep personal astrological awakenings. But when it's just sort of part of the everyday social culture, yeah, I find like it's not as interesting as it could be. I guess maybe one of the reasons I like doing the live stream, because I just babble into the microphone about whatever I like, and occasionally respond to you guys. So there's always something arrogant about a microphone. So it goes. Yeah, Pixie says, I like this perspective on astrology. It's a less subjective focus and more broad. Yeah, I think, again, I think that there's a certain level of astrology where, like, you might go into it wanting to learn more about yourself, and maybe that's what you do, and that's fine. It's just that, if you really want to go further in astrology, then you probably want to consider that sort of a phase that you go through and then graduate from, or at least sort of move on from in some way. But I don't want to demonize the behavior or even the culture. I'm just saying it's not like we have to put a stop to this or anything. It's just that no, there's more you can do. It's such a huge subject, and it should. One thing astrology's certainly done for me is just help me understand everything about the world better than I would otherwise. And that's always been part of my mission is, anything I know about humanity, I want to know the astrology behind it. Um, it's kind of a tall order, but you can't fault me for ambition. Um, yeah, so I'm not sure how I got on that track. I guess, yeah, with asking me about the predicting the health thing. I mean, yeah, that was something I saw coming from a long way, and then I tried not to think about it, which was just as well because when the time came, there wasn't really anything I could have done about it. It wasn't something that was apparently a result of my actions. I mean, with hindsight, I'd say, yeah, there are elements of my lifestyle I had to change, mostly having to do with sleep. Um, that did help me get on the road to recovery, but there was no way I could have deduced this without going through the experience. It wasn't anything I could sort of anticipate or get ahead of using astrology or maybe even medicine. So um, it, life is just sometimes like that. So a lot of us have bodies that are just ticking time bombs in some way. Um, some of us have appendixes inside of us that are, set to burst. Mine was when I was 12. Some of us have aneurysms in our brains that are set to just, go off and take us out without warning or anything. That happens to a certain small but insignificant percentage of us. Some of us have, heart defects or other physical defects that limit um, both our time on earth and the the quality of life we can enjoy while we're here. There's just some stuff that you can't change, and making yourself crazy looking at the astrology of it is not going to be terribly productive. All right. I feel like I'm just rambling and sermonizing and preaching from some kind of hill, which I don't intend to do. I just have an opinion. I know it sounds really passive aggressive, just my opinion, but I mean that really sincerely. This isn't hard law. There's this. It's fine to have different ideas than I have, usually anyway. Okay. Do I believe it's possible to avoid difficult astrological transits, mitigations? Can people change their fate a little if they see it coming? Um, I mean, some things yes, some things no. Um, that's a very nuanced question. I think some astrologers really do sort of sell the idea that you can mitigate or bargain anything. I think it's like if you're an astrologer for someone in Gaza right now, like what do you tell them? That they have choices, that they can do something to change their fate. I'm using a really, I'm not even trying to get political, but just like, if you happen to be someone in that kind of situation, I think it's probably fraudulent to give them a false hope that there's something they can do. If a situation is helpless, it's just that, I think. Um, Sometimes I feel like personal astrology turns into navel gazing or a fatalistic fear or filled attitude. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Kai says, anecdote about an aneurysm. Family member died suddenly from one, and it was when his progressed Mars emerged from under the beams. Okay, well, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I've known a couple of people that's happened to. I mean, it's terrifying because it just they get a headache one day, and then by the end of the day they're gone. Really sorry to that happened in your family. GF says best to just go through it and accept what's happening. I mean, most of the time, yeah. I mean, if you can change something, of course, but it's just not always possible. And yeah, it's sometimes some really hard realities just need to be accepted, or at least, if not accepted, acknowledged. I think I mean, I fought and fought, it's, if your body's telling you it doesn't, it can't do certain things, that it used to be able to do, and it's not just because you're getting a little older, that's a really infuriating thing. And I promise you, well, I want to say I didn't take it lying down, but it was sleep apnea. So actually, I took most of it lying down in the end, but not spiritually, but it's always very complicated. That's the thing that's always sort of troubled me a bit about whenever the fate or free will argument comes up in astrology, because I just don't, anyone who thinks these answers are absolute, I think is not sort of paying attention to the world very much. I think it's pretty clear that nobody has absolute control over their destiny. But some people do have a fair amount of control over their destiny, and some people have almost no control over their destiny. And you don't even need to be an astrologer to work that out. The Gaza example is very easy to use because it's contemporary, and we're talking about a situation of like quite extreme helplessness. But it stands. Or you can be someone who has enough resources that excuse me, that you've got a private plane waiting to whisk you out of whatever troublesome situation you might find yourself, or you can afford bodyguards, or you can afford a bulletproof car or whatever, and that may or may not help you overcome whatever the limitations you might otherwise have. Bliss to be. Do I think astrology has made me a more spiritual person? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I am the kind of person, I'll confess, I wasn't raised with any kind of religious background. And if I hadn't discovered astrology, well, I can tell you, I went through your usual adolescent atheism, which is, pretty normal. Your average adolescent atheism. My dad was an atheist. My mom got a master's in religious studies. So I had this sort of dichotomy in the family, that the one end was kind of hostile to religion and the other was curious, at least sort of intellectually, if not spiritually, about it. And then as I became a young adult, about 18 or so, becoming more conscious about the environment and ecology, I went from being atheist to thinking, okay, if plants are alive, even though they don't walk and talk, then clearly the planet is alive in the same sense that that plants are. There's an awareness. There's a life there. There's a consciousness, which is, I know, a word that tends to get overused in our field, but that's another conversation. The Gaia theory, basically, the Gaia idea. That was my sort of spiritual crossover, that going from, adolescent atheism to like, okay, the planet is our God, so to speak. That's when I was around 18. And then about just less than 8 years later, I discovered astrology. And sort of the Gaia went from just being, okay, planet Earth is alive and is our God, for want of a word, to, oh, it's the whole cosmos. It's not just, before astrology, it was like, okay, the planet is this sort of, Mother Earth, this conscious being that is nurturing us and giving us life. And then discovering astrology, it went sort of into outer space. It's not just the planet. The planet is part of this larger consciousness, this larger awareness. So I think that's how it's made me a spiritual person. Heck, I'm making a living reading these moving bits of light in the night sky. That's to my mind, that's more sort of demonstrably connected to divinity than, with all due respect, reading out of some old book. But that's me. I'm sorry if anyone finds that hostile. I'm a live and let live. I'm a great sort of coexister. But if you want to know what I think, that is what I think, right or wrong. I'm not a great believer in believing. I but I mean, ironically, when I got into astrology, it was more as more of an argument against sort of statism and nationalism than it was against religion. My life has never been sort of touched by religion, so I don't have the same grudge, that say like, I've got some friends who are raised Catholic who have, really big grudges against the Catholic Church for this and that reason. And I don't have any of those sort of, innate. I mean, as a sort of general social critic, sure, but my life was never sort of personally ruined or even touched by religion, so I don't really sort of think of it as a malign or overtly malign presence in my life, unlike maybe sort of other things. I hope that answers that. NBR says, what do I think about the next Libra eclipse in 2024? It will happen exactly on Israel's Neptune and Libra. Yeah. I mean, the Libra eclipse on Neptune, that certainly is interesting. I hope for the best. I mean, talk about here I've gone on this big sermon about, overcoming your subjective bias. Excuse me. The problem with this situation is it's just going to go on and on and on and on, as it always has. It's great that people are paying more attention to it. But this is just so, it's been like this in one shape or another for pretty much as long as I've been alive. And look at this, I've got a gray beard. I was a little kid. I wasn't even in grade school, and it was like this. Barring like a really extreme genocide, it's going to continue to be like this, as if it's not already sort of serious enough. So I don't know what to make of the eclipse on the Neptune. I really don't. It's going to be interesting to watch. But yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not prepared to sort of comment on that. I think I have to, at the end of the day, I have to do a study of the Middle East that's even more nuanced and detailed than anything I've done for Russia or the United States. I think it's probably it's Monday in astrology's greatest challenge. And just because it's that much harder to nail down. So yeah. David AC is asking, hey Nick, how are you? Yeah, I'm okay, David. How are you? I don't know. Do I seem okay? I guess we're having a heavy duty conversation today, but I don't feel depressed or anything. I guess we're talking about depressing things. Anyway, NBR, I'm sorry. It's not a very satisfactory answer. It's too messed up, man. It's just too messed up. I don't even know how to approach it. For a lot of the time that I've been studying mundane astrology, I mean, my Middle East file, which includes Israel, Palestine, but it's not it also has Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon. It just, that sort of general area. But that file has 273 charts. So it's nowhere near enough. But it's coming along. And ultimately, maybe historians who are better versed in Middle Eastern history can do more with the astrology than I can. So if that's you, I hope you're listening. Taking into account what I know about Uranus and the US, the rising tension with Israel, Palestine, Russia, China, Taiwan, etc., do I see a World War III scenario coming up? I mean, yeah, look, it's no secret when Uranus goes into Gemini in 2025. Oh, I've got an Iran file live tree. Iranians are Persian, and it's kind of a whole other, because they've got this Iran/Persia has, thousands of years of documented history, as opposed to, say, Iraq, where the library was trashed and it sort of left in the Stone Age a few hundred years ago. So it's harder to study like a long history of the Middle East the same way you can Iran. There are a few reasons for this. No sort of cultural bias on my part. But Iran is a much easier country to study astrologically than something like Israel or any of those countries around there. But to get back to David's point, I mean, I've always, the subtext of everything I've been talking about since I did Uranus USA in 2013, is that, I think there is a war coming up when Uranus goes into Gemini. I hate to say World War III. That just sounds, literally apocalyptic. But I mean, it is what it is. You can kind of see it all shaping up. The one step that I'm expecting that hasn't happened yet, and you touch on it right here, is China invading Taiwan. And I mean, that really will be, just everything will have moved into place once that happens. And for a little while, I thought maybe it wouldn't happen. But then then October came and the Hamas attack happened, and I realized, okay, there's dominoes falling. And it particularly when they were still looking for the speaker in Congress, like in October, you had the whole Gaza thing blowing up, and there was no speaker in Congress. And I'm like, man, China's never had a better opportunity to invade Taiwan than right now. So we managed to get through the speaker area easy enough. But it still feels like, like that's all that needs to happen. And Xi Jinping is, I mean, invading Taiwan would be a very stupid thing to do, but he's a very stupid person. He makes very stupid decisions. So like that doesn't sort of, you can't rule it out just because it's not terribly sensible of them. And I mean, once that does happen, and I think it's almost inevitable. It would be so great if it's not, but I'm kind of thinking it's inevitable. Once that happens, then I think technically we do have World War III on our hands, or as Cosmic Rose is pointing out, World War IV, because the Cold War was World War III, and that's a good argument to make there as well. But there's a whole argument to call the 7 Years' War of 1756 to 1763 to call that World War I, and then call World War I World War II, and to call World War II World War III, or World War II Part 2. There's a lot of different ways to slice this cake. Either way, no matter how you slice it, it's all craziness. It's all people, really, and especially like now we've got, the ecological issues are upon us. We saw how these last couple of summers went. The next summer will be likely worse, and the one after that worse still. And I mean, that's the most irresponsible thing about all this sort of ultra nationalism and all the sort of biases that all the hate, hate in these just in these contexts that just have no place in the 21st century. We've had a globalized world. People aren't going to appreciate what they had until it's gone, and it's pretty much vanishing, and they might, wish they still had it once it's gone. But I mean, we've had that. We've had tremendous scientific advancements. We've done so much, and so to be sort of focused on these sort of ancient ideas and killing each other over them, I'll never be able to stand by it. Anyway, I'm rambling now. Hopefully I haven't gotten too personal. I don't think I'm controversial. Maybe I say things that people disagree with, but I want you to know that I'm ultimately a live and let live coexist kind of guy, and that's, nothing's going to really change that, even in warfare. So yeah. All right. Well, I'm all cheered up. I hope I hope you guys are. I hope I've covered enough astrology here. This is a good example. This is one of the reasons why I tend to focus mostly on history as opposed to current events. Getting involved with things like the eclipse episodes that I just did with Chris. Obviously, we covered a lot of current events, and I'm kind of going against my own general code as an astrologer and doing it. Hopefully it's been to serve a good purpose. But part of the reason I don't talk about current events too much is that it's all, terrifying and infuriating and unfathomable. The one illusion I want to hold on to is the idea that, humanity is growing and is getting to a better place. That might be just too childish and naive for me to continue to maintain, but I'm trying. And I don't know what to say to you. I don't know what to say to people who ask me as an astrologer if I think World War III is coming, and I say yes. And God, I mean, it all just seems too crazy for words. Just too crazy. Well, I'm glad you're laughing, Kai. I don't know what you're laughing at. Maybe, hopefully, something funny I said a few minutes ago or something. Anyway, peace on earth, folks. We've had it. We can have it again. Okay. Well, thank you, GF. Thank you. Yeah, one way or the other, I might have to say unpleasant things, but I never want to say unpleasant things that aren't constructive or helpful in some way. It does feel very demoralizing to be in this position, knowing that, so much destruction will have to probably occur before we can really start to rebuild things in some kind of hopeful way. And that a lot of us probably won't make it to that point where we are rebuilding with some kind of hope. And, I obviously hope I'm wrong. There used to be, astrologers, we're not supposed to be out there sort of scaring the pants off people, that's what there've been good reasons why astrologers have been reluctant to sort of, predict the future and talk about this stuff. I think COVID changed the culture because COVID happened. And then you suddenly had a populace saying, wait a minute, why didn't you guys predict this? And astrologers are just really used to like keeping this stuff tight, if you know what I mean. And because a lot of us saw, that huge conjunction Capricorn in February of 2020 and knew that something big was coming, but it wasn't talked about as, with as much sort of immediacy as maybe it required. So I think there's been a cultural shift, and now astrologers are, a little more willing to talk about the dark side, acknowledge it's there, talk about its presence. Just because you hate it or you fear it, it doesn't mean, you have the right to pretend it's not there. Because I have been studying wars. I've been studying, you can see in my database, like even in countries that I haven't studied that much, I typically study the wars more than anything, like my Germany file. You saw like Franco-Prussian War and the World Wars, and with Austria and so on and so forth, Denmark. I tend to study war quite a bit. So I'm used to looking at these really sort of dark periods of human history. But living in one is a different matter. Living in one as a whole is a real drag. Studying it as an astrologer with clean hands and a view of the past, that's a luxury that's slipping through my fingers. I think that's what I need to acknowledge to myself. All right, folks. Yeah, Cosmic Rose, you mostly agree with me, but you want one forecast to fail. Yeah, no, I want that forecast to fail too. If you're predicting anyone other than Trump is winning the presidency, I want you to know I'm rooting for you. Professionally speaking, I disagree with you, but so it goes. I hope I'm good and humiliated when we get next year's election and Trump doesn't win. And yeah, everyone makes me get on my knees and beg forgiveness, which I will have to do should it come to that. And I don't expect the rest of you to get on your knees and beg forgiveness when Trump wins, because, it's unnecessary. Anyway, I really am rambling now. I hope this has been a good live stream for you guys. We went in some interesting directions. I usually like to cover a little more literal astrology than I did, but I think, we did cover some, and, hopefully I did right by you guys. Fantastic. My name is Nick Dagan Best. My website is nickdaganbestastrologer.com. I'm available for consultations of all kinds, anything astrological. The database, if you haven't gotten it yet, it's available at the astrologypodcast.com/database. Eventually, like I said, I will be selling a lot more files either on my website or through an app or both. Lilac Tree, would you or have you done an episode on why I think Trump will win? I did. There was the episode last year about Uranus and Gemini. And that was where I more or less made the prediction. I don't think in the episode I actually said Donald Trump will be the next election winner, but I said as much of that. And then sort of in response to that episode, I've said it on Twitter and on live streams like this. So I would watch you watch the Uranus and Gemini episode of the Astrology Podcast that we did, I think in October of 22. And that's more or less, you'll know why I think what I think. Why I think. Forgetting how many times I need to say I think in that sentence. All right, guys. Yeah. Check out that episode and maybe get back to me next week. And if that hasn't answered your question, we can talk about it. I'm finishing Peter Baker's book, The Divider, right now, and I read Maggie Haberman's book last month, Confidence Man. And I'm making a lot of files. I mean, I'm getting ready for when he's president. We really need and really more detail than anyone before. And that's where I'm heading. So it'll also be really funny if he does lose the election that I'm doing all this preparation on his life. But yeah, I think one way or the other, he's going to be worth studying, regardless of whether, you like it or not, and maybe even especially if you don't. All right. It's been fun. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.